Hey, we got done with the American Revolution. Now let's get to our vocab words on the French Revolution. So, when thinking the French Revolution, I want you to think one thing in particular. That is right. Heads will come off. Heads will roll during the French Revolution. You guessed it. So, let's go take a look at these vocab words that we got coming up. We're going to skip Enlightenment because that one is also on your packet for the American Revolution. And our second one is American Revolution. I'll give you a very quick definition of that. You should be able to get this already because you filled out a whole part on the American Revolution. This is when the 13 colonies that were formerly owned by Great Britain declared their independence because they were upset that they weren't being represented fairly and they thought they were being taxed unfairly. So they had a rebellion, a revolution, wrote their Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson, had a war led by General George Washington, won at the Battle of Yorktown, and established a new country, the United States of America, which will become a pretty important place. Let's look at our next word, which is the Ancient Regime, or kind of like ancient regime, pretty much. And this one is talking about the system that existed in France prior or before the French Revolution. Now, the French government was broken up into 3 estates, or 3 classes you could think of. You had the king on top. He was kind of like above everybody. Divine rule of king at this time, definitely, especially with leaders like Louis XIV that we talked about, who did have the best legs of any monarch of his era. Then you had the first estate, which was the clergy, who was the religious people, the priests, the bishops, etc. Different people were appointed by the church, and their job was to pray to God. And in the government, they had 1/3 of the power. And then you had the second estate, and they had, that's the class of people who were like nobles, who were pretty rich. This is the nobility. They were the second estate. And you had the third estate, which was everybody else, which is like 99% of the population pretty much, and you were supposed to farm food, and most of these people were poor. We're going to get in right to the next word right now, and that is going to be the Estates General. The Estates General is basically kind of like their parliament or Congress in France, where the king could call the Estates General. And they were supposed to get together to advise and to help the king, and basically to be the voice of all 3 estates in the government. The problem is that they only met when the king called them. So the Estates General would meet, and everyone got 1 vote. You had 3 estates. The clergy got a vote, the nobility got 1 vote, and the people got 1 vote. So you can see, we could probably put the people in the middle of that one. You can see how they probably felt about it. So we had, again, first estate, second estate, third estate. And a huge chunk of people in the third estate got 1 vote. So they were almost always outvoted by the first and the second estate, which meant that the people really did not have much power. What you're looking at here is our next word, which is the tennis court oath. What happened was basically King Louis XVI was not doing a good job, and he was basically forced to call the Estates General. And the usual thing was going on where the nobility and clergy were, basically getting together, and the third estate was feeling like they weren't being spoken to. They get locked out of the Estates General. And while the nobility and clergy are able to meet, but they lock out the third estate. So what happens is basically the third estate finds the nearby building, they call it the tennis court oath, even though it was a place they played handball, and there basically they pledge that they are going to start a new government that will be more for the people, and basically this is the real beginning of the French Revolution. Heads will roll soon. The storming of the Bastille. This was basically when the people of the third estate, who were fed up with the king, were fed up with how things were going in France. It's basically the beginning of the revolution. They stormed the Bastille, which is a symbol of the old regime. It used to house a lot of prisoners. At this time, it only housed 7. But they go there, and they go in it because they want to get weapons, because they want to fight to keep the Third Estate, or basically their new government going in France, to make it into a republic. So they storm the Bastille, they go and they take the weapons, and then with the Bastille, with this building that used to hold prisoners, and it was a sign of the French monarchy, they take the thing apart brick by brick with their hands and basically destroy the entire thing. It is seen as basically the symbol that the people have taken over and that they are destroying the old monarchy. Our next word is, our term is the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen. This is a document written by Robespierre, and it becomes the guidance, kind of like the Declaration of Independence was for the United States, becomes for the French Revolution, that they are declaring themselves free of the monarchy, they have a new government, and it asserts the rights of man and the citizen, fully called Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, and it was written by Robespierre during the French Revolution. Our next term is the Reign of Terror. This happened during the French Revolution. There were difficulties with the revolution wasn't going as well, and they wanted people to follow the new rules of the revolution. There was fear that there were enemies of the revolution, that people were trying to have a counter-revolution or to bring the king back. So from 1793 to 1794, it was called the Reign of Terror, where many people were killed in the guillotine we see here, where heads were cut off, who were seen as being counter-revolutionaries or were going against the revolution. So the Reign of Terror was basically a way to make the revolution happen, to have it happen through terror. And yes, it is actually the root of where the word terrorism comes from, when you try to get people to do things out of fear of violence. That connects us to our next word, the guillotine, and here we see here the guillotine. The guillotine is a contraption where a blade comes down, as you'll see in the French Revolution video, and cuts off people's heads. And heads rolled on this one. King Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette's head gets chopped off. Even Robespierre's head gets chopped off, who's basically the architect of the French Revolution. Let's go to Robespierre. He was the architect of the French Revolution. He wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen, responsible for it. He is basically, with others, the main leader and inspiration of the French Revolution, which is following Enlightenment ideals. Basically ideals that came from the Enlightenment, from Voltaire, from Montesquieu, John Locke, to bring rights to the people. However, Robespierre kind of goes a bit too far in some ways. He changes the days of the week to 10 days a week, wants to basically get rid of the church, make his own church, and eventually Robespierre will lose his head in the guillotine as well, but he is the main person who is behind the French Revolution. And here's our last guy of the French Revolution. This is Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte, he comes in at the end of the French Revolution, and basically he's a military leader who's able to win a lot of victories. He comes in and is able to take power, and he becomes pretty much the dictator, and his family kind of becomes a new line of kings for a while after the French Revolution. He builds an empire, starts taking over lots of land in Europe, is eventually stopped by Russia in the cold. He gets defeated, and he's put in exile twice once he escapes. Then he's put in exile again, and he doesn't get away the second time. And basically, he takes over the revolution and brings France from being kind of like the chaos of the revolution, bringing some order, but brings back a dictatorship which looks a lot like a monarchy again. And that's Napoleon. You'll be reading a lot about him in the next few chapters.